Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special meeting of the Arlington County Board on February 28th of 2022. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Vice Chairman Dorsey, Mr. Carantonis, Ms. Garvey, Mr. DeFerranti. Tonight we are convening for a special meeting to consider an item that we actually heard at our February 12th meeting. Since then, it became apparent that the County Board meeting date on the required notice posted on site for several agenda items was incorrect. Only the items that require the on-site posting were affected by this issue. To make things perhaps clear, perhaps less clear, it is our local ordinance that requires a physical posting of material for land use items like use permits and site plans. So only those items were affected. All items were advertised correctly pursuant to the Code of Virginia, which requires us to advertise in print newspaper. So we are going to be hearing one of those items again tonight, importing all of the public comment that was made at our previous meeting for the record, and we will be hearing or bringing forward on our consent agenda the balance of those items at our March meeting. Before we launch in to that, however, I think we all appreciate having the opportunity of being gathered here tonight to acknowledge the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and most particularly the impact on Arlington County's sister city of Ivano-Frankivsk, which has been a sister city in every sense of the word. I know that many of us have welcomed the opportunity to meet, in particular, their firefighters who have been friends and students of the Arlington County Fire Department, and that members of the county board have indeed visited there. So I would like to bring forward a resolution on behalf of the board, which reads as follows. Whereas on March 4th of 2011, the Arlington County Board voted to establish a partnership with the city of Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine, the purpose of which is to foster friendship and the promotion of mutual tolerance and understanding by establishing ties between the citizens and institutions of the two communities. And whereas our two communities, through our sister city partnership, have welcomed opportunities to participate in mutual exchanges of people, culture, and ideas, including a student exchange program with Swanson Middle School. And whereas the Arlington County Board has welcomed several exchanges to share information and expertise with public safety responders in our sister city, and the board has participated in formal meetings with government officials, while the government of Ivano-Frankivsk has similarly participated and welcomed delegations of our own government and staff. Whereas in mutual respect of our cultures and history, Arlington County is compelled to speak against unjust action against Ukraine and demonstrate support for our friends and partners. And whereas on February 24th of 2022, a Russian missile struck the airport in Ivano-Frankivsk, Arlington's sister city in Ukraine, only hours after the Russian Federation launched an invasion into the sovereign country. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Arlington County Board condemns the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the unprovoked attack on our sister city, Ivano-Frankivsk, that we further reaffirm our community's unwavering support for democratic sovereign nations like Ukraine to be safe, independent, and self-governing, free to follow their own values and build their own future. And finally, resolved that Arlington County stands in support and solidarity with the people of Ivano-Frankivsk and all of Ukraine in their defense of sovereignty and democracy. We are keeping our sister city and all of the people of Ukraine in our thoughts and hearts at this difficult time, and we know that many members of our community join us in doing so. All right. Note as well, we don't have anybody joining us in the boardroom tonight. I believe anybody participating in our one item will be doing so virtually, but you will note that county board members are wearing masks right now. Certainly this is a time of change given the CDC's guidelines. We know that our partners on the school board have updated their policy pursuant to not only the CDC guidelines on masking, but also a governor's directive and new state law. There will be more information forthcoming from Arlington County government in the next couple of days about masking policy and recommendations in county buildings and programs following the CDC's new recommendations. For now, we are erring on the side of caution, particularly out of respect for our colleagues who may be living with those who are highly vulnerable. We are also maintaining our 6-foot distances from one another. So I think we do have a couple of remote speakers tonight, so I'll just note you, per usual, if you could keep your microphones muted and your cameras off until you're called to speak. You will need to unmute yourself using *6 if you're on the phone, or by clicking the microphone button on the toolbar if you're using Teams on an app or browser. After speaking, you can exit the call and continue to participate in the meeting via the live stream online or cable channels Comcast 25 and 1085 and Verizon Fios 39 and 40. Okay, we are ready, I believe, to move on to our one agenda item. Madam Clerk, could you call that for us?
Yes, it's a public hearing consideration of a site plan 463 for a multifamily residential development, including modifications, located at 1300 and 1305 North Pierce Street.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I believe that we will begin with some comments, if not a full presentation from the staff. So, Mr. Manager, I'll turn things over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Mr. Cullen to join us and make a few brief comments and a short presentation. Mr. Cullen?
Hi, good evening. I'm going to try to give a fairly brief presentation. So again, I'm Michael Cullen with the Arlington County Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development's Planning Division. So this agenda item includes a new site plan request for redevelopment of the Marbella Apartments site. The site plan was discussed previously at the February 12th, 2022 County Board meeting, at which two associated items were approved, a vacation of an easement for public purposes and allocation of AHIF loan funds for the project. The site location is within the Roslyn Metro Station area and immediately adjacent to the Courthouse Metro Station area and approximately 1/2 mile from each metro entrance. The project site is located on the east and west sides of North Pierce Street in the Radnor-Fort Myer Heights neighborhood, which is comprised of varied housing types and styles ranging from scattered single-family and townhouse units to low-rise garden apartments, 5 to 8-story mid-rise multifamily buildings, and some taller buildings, such as the 11-story Prospect House located on North Oak Street to the east. To briefly summarize the current project proposal, Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, or APA, has filed a site plan application that proposes two new 12-story multifamily apartment buildings to be constructed in two phases with a total of 555 units at approximately 260 units per acre and a combined parking ratio of 0.48 spaces per unit. The general land use plan map designation for the site is medium residential, which outlines a base density range of up to 37 to 72 dwelling units per acre. However, the current GLUT map includes a note regarding additional density that may be approved by the county board when a development is consistent with county goals, policies, and plans, including objectives identified in section 1559 of the zoning ordinance. The site is the site is zoned RA 615 multiple family dwelling district, which corresponds with the medium residential GLUP designation and allows for multifamily buildings up to 60 feet in height at up to 48 units per acre under by right development, or buildings up to 70 feet in height at up to 60 units per acre through site plan approval subject to section 1237 of the ordinance. Up to 60 additional feet of building height with no specified limit on density may be permitted under section 1559 for projects with commitments to low and moderate income housing and use of mitigation strategies to ensure projects are designed to establish effective transitions to lower density residential areas. These images illustrate examples of the strategies to achieve effective height transitions as outlined in section 1559, which have been implemented in site plan projects and include adapting to site topography, implementing landscape buffers, controlling sense of scale through architectural facade treatments, transitioning through building taper, and increased setbacks between buildings. To evaluate whether the project meets these standards, staff completed a building height analysis of the project that considers urban design elements in an area-wide context, through which staff identified priority frontages that seek to focus more effective use of the mitigation strategies outlined in section 1559, including use of potentially intensive tools such as additional building taper, greater building setbacks, and greater landscape buffers to soften building height transitions. Staff also reviewed several projects that represent relevant examples of appropriate building transition, including the Union on Queen project in North Fort Myer Heights, the Monroe Building in Virginia Square, and the approved American Legion project currently under construction on Washington Boulevard. apologies. My slide is not advancing on my screen.
Hey, Michael, this is Anthony. I was sharing the slides. Your slides were not displaying for the presentation.
Oh, they're not? Okay.
No.
Thank you. Okay, so I should be on slide 9. Thank you. I'll let you know. Incorporating comments and feedback received from staff, community, and SPRC members, APA has incorporated design revisions in both buildings since the initial submission of the site plan. The buildings have been sculpted on all sides to improve transitions along priority frontages, in addition to increased building setbacks on North Bode Street and greater landscape buffer area on the north side of Site A. Proposed pedestrian paths were also consolidated to the south side of both buildings compared with the original submissions. The currently proposed design achieves greater compatibility with the neighborhood and a better transition to adjacent lower scale development. On slide 10, since the project was discussed on February 12th, APA has requested that an alternative facade design be approved that incorporates fiber cement panels comprising approximately 30% of the facade area of the Site A building, where 9% low-income housing tax credit units are located, which roughly equates to 15% of the total facade area of the building. This change does not result in a cost savings, but is a result of a new LIHTC scoring category revised last month that allows for up to 20 additional points when exterior walls are constructed using fiber cement board, covering up to 50% of the exterior walls. This image illustrates potential fiber cement facade areas visible from North Queen Street. On slide 11, this image illustrates potential application areas visible from North Pierce Street. And so the applicant has agreed to language in condition number 26 that would preserve this proposed treatment as an option, and it would allow administrative approval of the original primarily brick facade material previously considered by the SPRC, Planning Commission, and the County Board. By way of example, APA has referenced the recent Queens Court project in Western Roslyn as a recent project where this proposed fiber cement panel treatment has been implemented. In this case, in addition to brick and metal panel materials, which are the fiber cement materials highlighted here in white outline. As noted previously, the project proposes to achieve a full commitment for affordable dwelling units, in addition to delivering 57 affordable type A units. And as a site plan, the project will deliver standard benefits such as contributions to the public art and utility underground funds, in addition to streetscape improvements that include sidewalk improvements and undergrounding of existing utilities around the site. The project will also achieve Earthcraft Gold certification. Proposed zoning modifications include additional density and building height, and required parking and density exclusions for garage level space that does not increase the size or mass of the building. The SPRC held 4 opportunities for input on the proposed site plan amendment between October and November 2021, including 2 virtual meetings, an online engagement opportunity, and an on-site walking tour. Transportation Commission heard the project in late January 2022 and recommended approval. Housing Commission also recommended approval for the project on February 3rd. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the project on February 3rd as well. In closing, staff recommends approval for the site plan for redevelopment consisting of 2 12-story building towers and associated modifications, including all other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan. Thank you.
Mr. Cullen, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, I do not believe that we have any commissioners joining us this evening, although we may have one available for questions. Is that correct?
We do have Mr. Lantelmi from the Planning
Okay,
Commission.
excellent. Mr. Lantelmi, welcome. We were fortunate to have a fulsome presentation from the Planning Commission previously, and so we're really glad to have you, especially with that one update that Mr. Cullen shared about the facade. And if you'd like to give comments at this time, we'd welcome them. If you'd prefer to simply wait and be engaged with any questions, we'd welcome that as well, whatever your preference.
I'm sure if you have questions, I'm certainly available. Our only concern was I'm passing along from the chair of the SPRC for this is her concern that given the amount of material that will be potentially changed by this, that she regrets we were not able to actually review it at SPRC. Other than that, yes, I'm available for questions. And since the Planning Commission didn't get to look at these changes, obviously the PC has no opinion on the change in material since as a body, we have not been able to review it. So anyway, I'm here for any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lantelmi. And so With that, I believe we will move on to our public speakers. As a reminder, again, we had quite a few public speakers on this item when we last heard it at our February meeting earlier this month. All of those comments have been included and will be included in the record of this hearing. We wanted to assure anybody who may be watching and felt remiss if they didn't come to repeat their comments, that not only did we hear them and take them under advisement, they will also be reflected in the record. So with that, Madam Clerk, could you call our speakers, please?
Yes, we have 3 speakers. We will start with Alex Pilkington, I'm sorry, forgive me, followed by Sine Kubota.
Good evening.
Hi, everyone.
How are you?
Pretty good. My last name's pronounced Pilkington, but thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm an Arlington resident, and I'm speaking today in support of the proposed Marbella residential development. Our county is facing a seriously insufficient supply of housing to meet the current demand. As a result, rent prices are skyrocketing, and many within our Arlington community are being suffocated by these rising housing costs. Now, I don't like to view things in a binary way, but the truth is there's only 2 paths forward for Arlington. 1, we support developers in their efforts to build as many housing units as possible. Or 2, we obstruct developers from building as many housing units as possible. Only the first option aims to address our current county's impending housing crisis. With this proposed development project, the land being used for it will house nearly 8 times the amount of Arlingtonians than it currently does. This is a fantastic first step. Arguments against housing development that are rooted in schooling, traffic congestion, etc., can be addressed, but should not preclude vital developments that will ease housing cost burdens on Arlington residents from happening. Arguments against housing development that are rooted in preserving property values, neighborhood characteristics, or general disdain for density are unserious at best and malicious at worst. Our county cannot afford the status quo if we are to avoid a worsening housing crisis, and we cannot allow those who benefit from the status quo dictate our county's housing needs. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pilkington.
Our next speaker is Sine Kubota, followed by Stuart Stein.
Hi, my name is Sanai Kubota, and I'm a homeowner within Lisa Court. I continue to support increased affordable housing at the Marbella site and improved living conditions for my Marbella neighbors. But I would like to reiterate my opposition to the board's approval of the proposed Marbella project design as stated during the board meeting on February 12th, 2022. It is true that there is no iteration of a 12-story building above a 2-level, partially above ground garage that would make me happy. But I realize where we are in the process and have not been asking for a design that would make me happy. I was just asking for an increased minimum setback, one that the county staff would assess to be as effective as in the exemplar sites. What we have now is less than half of the minimum setback among the exemplar sites. Will the setback for the next project be less than half of ours? While I maintain that the Marbella proposal does not have an effective transition and should not be approved as submitted, I would also like to acknowledge that the design is better now than the initial submission. Granted, APA did acknowledge outright that their initial submission was intentionally aggressive because they understand the SPRC to be a negotiated process. Nevertheless, given the tremendous pressure they heard throughout the process to ignore neighbor input, it is noteworthy that some changes reflective of our requests were made to the site plan. I appreciate the work of county staff and APA in implementing these changes. I'm also left wondering what the final design could have been if APA had been encouraged and applauded for working with neighbors rather than berated. Finally, I want to circle back a bit. As I said, I haven't been asking for the design to become something I'd be happy with, something I would think is of an appropriate scale for our neighborhood. I know that ship sailed a long time ago. Unfortunately, my neighbors and I didn't even know the ship existed until 3 days before it set sail. We learned of the zoning ordinance amendment 3 days before the vote that approved it, and even then completely by chance. It is no secret that the scale and fundamental scope of this particular project was approved with that vote. I have since learned that there is a lot of information posted on the county website, and had we been scouring it diligently in our spare time, we probably could have learned of the plans earlier and known of the opportunity to participate in what I've heard was an extensive process leading up to the amendment. It really is great that the information is available, and I take responsibility for not seeking it out. But I also think that if community engagement really is desired, it would help to bring the information to the neighbors rather than just having it available to be found. For better or worse, there is no shortage of means to bring information to an audience these days, and that power can be used for good. I think my neighbors and I showed that we were eager to participate in a reasonable and productive manner once we knew there was something to participate in. I think that will be true for others as well. Increased outreach to the community at all stages of planning can go a long way, and I encourage the board to pursue it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kubota.
Our final speaker is Stuart Stein.
Yes, hello. I
evening.
strongly stand by my previous statement, and so, of course, I'm very disappointed by the outcome. I'm also very disappointed that the site plan process is not capable of dealing with the incredibly reasonable concerns of the adjacent properties. Even with a capable and dedicated chairperson as Elizabeth Morton. I felt the need to say something more when I heard someone refer to the most important people in the process. It was her opinion that the most important people were those that have not yet moved into Arlington. And she questioned the value of the opinions of the immediate neighbors, the current residents in adjacent properties. I could not disagree more. The most important people to consider are always those that would be displaced. And that is why I do appreciate APA's dedication to zero displacement, which I think the county should be adopting as policy. But as to the current residents of my or any other community, I have no doubt that their concerns are the most important. As to dismissing the concerns of the adjacent neighbors, that was once the default attitude of the county, especially many in the staff. I have not heard that type of comment from the staff in many years. For that, I am very grateful. In fact, I'm impressed with staff's efforts to try and hear the concerns of neighboring buildings. If in any way it is the attitude of others in the county, I find that horrifying. I wish, of course, you would reconsider and allow an opportunity for the adjacent buildings concerned to be worked out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Appreciate you. Does that conclude our public speakers, Madam Clerk?
Yes, it does.
And I was remiss. I launched straight into our commissions without welcoming the applicant, who I believe is with us tonight. I think it might be Mr. Sims representing APA, is that right? Or Mr. Chiappa? Or someone else from APA with us this evening.
Yes, that's correct. I'll be representing APA I'll be representing on behalf of APA.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Were there any comments you wanted to make before we bring the conversation to the board, or are you largely here to be available for questions? Either is fine.
I'm largely here to be available for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Sims. It's nice to see you again. All right. The conversation is now with the board. I think I'm going to call for a motion to set the frame of the conversation. And I don't know if any of my colleagues, we had not orchestrated this before, Mr. Dorsey might be prepared to offer such a motion.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the county board approve site plan 463, which is a 555-unit multifamily residential development consisting of 2 towers with modifications of use regulations to include additional building height, density, along with density exclusions, required parking, and other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan.
Thank you very much. That's been moved and seconded. We'll have a conversation on that motion. Mr. DeFerranti, comments?
Sure. I'll just offer brief and then concluding comments. Happy to support the motion. I would just note that I very much appreciate the 3 speakers, each thoughtful comments. And Ms. Kubota, I really appreciate you coming back. There is one sort of point that I would share. I think you mentioned the process concern that you had with respect to the original amendment to allow additional height. I actually think you and your neighbors have really shown us that the process on this specific site plan has been very beneficial. So I won't quibble at all with your concern about us continuing to work on doing better community engagement. I just think that you had perhaps just a little bit more time, and you could still make reasonable differ in the very thoughtful way that you did. But I think it was sort of with respect to this site plan that process would be relevant. But my overall analysis continues to be that to align really with Mr. Pilkington, that we have to be mindful of housing supply and the additional supply here. I'm very glad that the applicant staff took steps to modify the proposal to accommodate and to be I guess the second or third iteration rather than the first, but happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. DeFerranti. I have just one question for our staff, which is to the point about the facade, trying to make sure that I understand the implications of the new posture by Virginia Housing, and whether we anticipate seeing these types of facade changes, or I suppose not changes, but facade expectations work their way into future committed affordable projects in Arlington. Is there any more that you can say about the likely, I don't know that precedential is quite right because that sounds excessively formal, but the likely that this might be the first of others that we'll see making this change in order to compete most effectively for tax credits at the state level?
So I think we have tonight Chris Dematzis with our housing division with us, and I think he's probably better to go into some detail. But I will say, just from my impression, is that this is generally pretty new for everyone involved, including the applicant team. So they may want to opine on it as well, but I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thanks so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm actually Alex McMillan. I'm here in place of Chris Dematzis tonight. So I would also like to let that applicant, answer this question, because I do think they have the most amount of experience talking with Virginia Housing on this. But as you know, this is there was a QAP released just this year by Virginia Housing, and it did have that change in it. I do think it is something that APA is working with VH to maybe see a change in the future. But
could you, I'm sorry, Mr. McMillan, could you tell us what QAP stands for?
Qualified Action Plan. Is that correct, Charles?
It's the Qualified Allocation Plan, which VH does a big update every 3 years and then does intermittent updates each year.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So to speak to the question in reference to changes, this creates the scoring change. So it was previously a building was to be 85% in brick to get maximum facade points. Presently, it's requiring on the 9% side 50% fiber cement and 50% in brick in order to max out points. And we're doing our best to make the project as competitive as possible. As you guys know, 9% tax credits are very competitive, and we're trying to do our best to bring them into Arlington County for this development.
Excellent. So do you anticipate that'll become the norm for future projects, more fiber cement than brick?
Potentially, but it's unknown whether or not this is a requirement VH will keep, or if it'll modify in the future for buildings of certain heights, et cetera.
Okay, excellent. Well, I appreciate that brief conversation. I think, as our Planning Commission representative noted, this is does to some extent change the look and feel of the building. So helpful to understand what's driving it. And I think it's very much in everybody in this community's interest that projects that are approved be as competitive as possible for the state tax credits. Mr. Sims, thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Yeah, on the same line. So I was really surprised when I saw that Virginia Housing is actually encouraging to use a cheaper material that has also a shorter lifespan in general. So we here in Arlington, we have had our fair share of discussions about the use of fiber cement on facades. We have several, commercial site plans that we approved. APA is actually, they've used it before, just not in the ratio 50-50. So in general, my experience was that the use of fiber cement instead of brick veneer just doesn't render a great architecture. It's not more environmentally friendly on the long term because it's not as insulating as brick veneer properly installed is, and it has a shorter lifespan, a shorter life cycle, I should say. So I wonder whether we should take note of this change and think about working with our partners in Virginia Housing to investigate a little bit better what their actual intention is here. It's not the first time that a housing provider, that a housing finance institution tries to force cost-effective building. That's correct. But there is also the argument of life cycle, and that's really concerning to me. So my question is whether CPHD is looking at this regulation. And I do understand that this is optional, right? So this is not compulsory. So what does this mean, being optional?
I think that may be a question possibly for our applicant or maybe our housing staff.
I can probably jump in.
Yeah,
sure. So the condition sort of sets this up as an option, and what that means is when, post-approval, when the applicant comes in with the facade treatment plan, that is an administrative review and approval, they would have the option of submitting really either facade treatment. We wanted to preserve that. I mean, typically with our projects, we tend to be prescriptive on the designs so that they, remain consistent with what went through the public process. But we didn't want to sort of leave the original design behind, and in the event that APA could work something out with Virginia Housing so that they could remain competitive, we didn't want them to have to go back to the board to go back to the original design that I think most people prefer.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karantonis. This is an excellent question. Mr. Dorsey, other questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to address some of the points that were raised by Sanai Kubota. She exposes what is a conundrum that I know we constantly grapple with, how to make sure our engagement reaches those who want to be engaged. And, there is certainly a layered approach that I think we try to put into action with things that are available not only on the website, but usually widely circulated within civic associations, but recognizing that civic associations don't necessarily include all members of the community. We try to post information on, online channels like Nextdoor, but recognizing that not everybody is on those. We look at a layered approach and hopefully reach as many people as possible through the multiple ways that we engage. But the reality is none of those tools in and of themselves, or even when they're layered together, will necessarily mean that we'll reach everyone who wants to be reached or wants to be engaged. So I would just like to invite her to continue to have conversation with us about ways in which she feels that we can execute that desire better, because we all do. I can just speak for myself in saying that one of the worst things is to have someone who wanted to participate who wasn't aware, and therefore comes into their civic engagement not only frustrated, but feeling like they had something to contribute that wasn't made possible. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Ms. Garvey.
Thank you. I think I'll pick up both threads if I can. And I appreciate Ms. Sabota coming and talking as well. When I was on the school board years ago, we had these same issues, and what we learned was, with particularly school, we started leafleting, putting flyers in the doors of the immediate neighbors of a school. And that helped. I mean, you always have some people who haven't been reached, but I wonder if on this, if you just sort of looked at the site, it'd be pretty clear that the folks in Lisa Court were the ones who would be concerned. And maybe moving forward, we should consider doing something like just put a flyer through the doors. It wasn't all that many doors, and I think we ran into that a little bit with, actually quite a bit, with the Pentagon City project that we had the same day we considered this. That it wasn't as clear that the people 250 feet above the site were so concerned, but I think we do need to find some ways to push out information and not always just go electronic. Sometimes just the real basic as they say, flyer through the door. There'll always be people who haven't seen it, but at least we can say we have done, a lot that we tried. So it just sort of suggests that possibility as we kind of look through and looking for other suggestions as well. And then I did have a question for, I guess, our staff. I should know this. One of the major concerns from our commissions, all of our commissions, approved this except for our environmental folks who were concerned about it not being as, not carbon neutral, not necessarily all electric, and a lot of concerns about that. Does the Virginia Housing Authority, do they give any points for the environment in what they do when they hand out these loans? I should know this. I probably heard it. I don't remember. And I don't know who's supposed to respond to that.
So this is Charleston with the applicant. Sorry, Michael, were you going to speak?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Yes, there are, in terms of points, there's certain thresholds that we're meeting. So for instance, this development is going to be Energy Star Gold. Additionally, we'll have solar panels and other environmentally friendly features. So there are incentives for it, but not necessarily being 100% electric.
So 100% electric does not have incentives, but the things that you went for do have incentives with Virginia. Is that what I heard?
Energy Star Gold does have an incentive.
Yes, Energy Star Gold does. Okay, that's helpful to know. And I think it sort of gets at the point if, and we probably have some work to do in Richmond and things, if there's some of these things that indeed we want to do or that our environmental folks want us to do, because I understand how you all have to kind of respond to the incentives that you've got, because what you want is the financing. So I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And not to be an apologist for VHDA, but they also are trying to triangulate among a lot of communities that are very different when it comes
I totally
to funding and allocating.
Yeah.
So, but a good point nonetheless. And I appreciate between your comments and Mr. Karantonis's about, is this in fact incenting the most sustainable, right? Whether that's duration or environmentally, to your point, Ms. Garvey, possible materials. It would certainly seem to me, because I know one of the primary criterion is cost per unit. And so I'm sort of a little unclear about why that wouldn't just be a function or the cost of the facade wouldn't be part of that function. But nevertheless. Ms. Garvey, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, you did not. No, I was finished. I mean, I'm acknowledging it's complex, there's a lot to go. I do appreciate, the constant pushing, that's how you do get change. And it is hard and it's not happening now. But I think we need to, think about how to have things come out a little differently, and you have to change how you do it if you want to have that happen. But it's certainly not easy. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, I think we're largely ready for vote. I'll just make a comment in conclusion. I want to thank all three of our speakers for coming back out and reiterating what I think were the contours of a very difficult and important conversation that we had a few weeks ago. Ms. Kubota, I particularly appreciate, I think you and your neighbors have engaged in the definition of good faith. To me, I don't know that I appreciated your point. It's probably past the point of making anyone happy. And I don't think that was necessarily the goal, but I do think we had reached a point in this project as it moved through these iterations where it was, and like Mr. Pilkington, I don't like to think in binaries, but it was a nearly one-to-one trade-off, that any more setbacks meant the loss of more affordable housing in this area where it's so needed, with access to the metro and so much economic opportunity. And so I think there were some really difficult conversations had along the way. And I know that there are some perspectives that too much housing was sacrificed to the setbacks. And I think it is absolutely valid. There's also the perspective that too much setback or blending in with the neighborhood or mitigating the impacts on you and your neighbors was sacrificed in the name of affordable housing. I think this is ultimately became a difficult conversation in that regard. I know that it is better for the fact that you and your neighbors participated in it, and we really appreciate your time. Mr. Pilkington, Mr. Stein, I also appreciated your comments as well. I think helping contextualize this particular dialogue within our broader conversations about how we can both value our neighbors who currently call Arlington home and be the kind of community that can welcome and make room for more neighbors as well. All right, with that, I believe we are ready for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, I do not believe there is any more matters to come before the board this evening. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great. And as a reminder, the other items that were inaccurately advertised, a number of use permits, as well as a form-based code hearing on the Elliott will be heard at our March meeting. So with that, I will see everyone back in the boardroom tomorrow for the first of our budget work sessions. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We are adjourned.